Welcome to the Afterthoughts podcast. Today we are having a very real conversation. So if you have kids in the car, a warning up front. We are going to talk about pornography today, and we're going to get straight into the conversation. This is a crucial conversation that needs to be had, and so many people in this battle. And so today's all about fighting for freedom, and that's the conversation that the three of us want to share and be a helpful tool for people that are working through this, battling with pornography. And so let me start with just asking you guys, how big of a problem is this? You've done a lot of research. We've been having a lot of conversation about this. How big of a problem is pornography in our culture? Because I think a lot of people would say, you're going to spend a podcast talking about battling pornography. Like, that's just a normal part of life.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I'll start by saying, just in conversations that I have, and keep this at a ground level, because I recently gave a message about this topic called Fight for Freedom. And so you might be watching this because you saw that message. You might be watching this and then this is going to speak straight to you, and then I want to point you to that message after this. But in that sermon, I essentially said I'm speaking from three authorities. I'm speaking from the authority of Scripture. I'm speaking from the authority of science. And I'm speaking from the authority of my testimony and my experience. I should have added a fourth. The fourth authority would be, I am speaking from everybody in this room's experience as well. So we do, one thing we do a lot is pastoral conversations one-on-one or in a group setting where I would probably say in the last 12 years, I've had over 2,000 one-on-one conversations about real stuff, not small talk stuff. I love it. I meet with people, mostly guys in our church all the time, to talk about the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And I would say it's almost like pastors are more dialed into the highest of highs and the lowest of lows than anybody else. I have my finger on the pulse of what everybody's going through. And it is wild. And I say that without a judgmental bone in my body, because this is a big part of my story and historically a big struggle for me. And so I say that with no judgment, but I say that to make the point, this is a big problem. And a lot of people might not think it is, because it's a taboo problem that actually brings with it a lot of shame. There's some stuff when it comes to what your struggles are, it's kind of easy to vocalize, because like, oh man, for instance, if you were gonna say, I'm having a lot of problems because I'm sleeping around a lot, is way easier to say.
For sure.
You actually kind of, because you know it's bad, but you kind of sound cool confessing it. Way easier to say than, I am addicted to pornography. Totally. You feel shameful even saying that. You feel like people are gonna look at you like you're perverted or gross, and so people keep it quiet until they're in a one-on-one meeting with the pastor, and they also feel, they all of a sudden feel like the walls can come down and I can be real. I get the luxury, the honor, as do the two of you, to be across a cup of coffee over a lot of those conversations. So many people are struggling with this. This is a big thing.
To put some numbers to that, so the top 5 porn sites in the world account for 6 billion clicks every single month.
Every month.
So that's almost a click per person in the world per month.
Wow.
That's like,
wow.
It's incredible. It's insane. Like it's awful. It is, how many billions of dollars a year?
Over 100. This was 3 years ago. The stat was over $100 billion a year industry, the porn industry.
So it just goes to show you, one, if you're watching this and you feel like you're the only one, you are not. And I think that's a really important starting point. But two, from 30,000 feet, like from a cultural level, this is a topic that needs to be talked about. It needs to be addressed because, and we can get into all of this, it really is messing things up, and it's messing up a world. The space I'm always in, of course, the singleness space. One of the things I see, the patterns I see, is that there's this rise of singleness, that people are staying single way later and way longer. And I don't think it's a coincidence that seems to be directly correlated to the amount of pornography that we are consuming. It's almost like we're retraining our minds to not be in loving, romantic, sacrificial relationships, right?
Yep. 7 years ago, the big stat that came out that shocked everybody is the porn industry takes in more money than the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball every year combined. It's way past that now.
Wow.
It used to be like a little past that. Now it's way way past that. It's crazy.
Wild.
So I think that because we live in a culture that's so sexualized, and porn is kind of just like a laugh kind of thing, like, well, yeah, that's something that everybody just normalizes.
Yeah.
How do you help people understand that truly addictive nature of it?
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of people, it's like, that's just kind of a normal part of life.
Right.
It's part of society.
Right.
It's what people do. But there are actually scientific realities to addiction when it comes to this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, the reality of like screens is still so relatively new, and all the science is coming out and showing, oh my gosh, like the power for addiction that screens have over the human brain is wild. It's wild. And that's
just any screen.
Screens,
like
dude.
watching anything.
Yeah.
And before we even get to the porn part,
Oh,
we first have a screen issue.
Oh, yeah.
But then you add to that the porn and keep going.
Well, yeah, and just not even talking about pornography for a second, but I was with Dad driving around about a year ago, and we were in their neighborhood in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful neighborhood, but there was like no kids outside. Yeah. And I said, Dad, when I was a kid, and me and Ryan were 7 and 8, were there more kids just outside playing? And he just kind of laughed. He said, oh my gosh, like there used to be so many more kids outside playing. And I thought, you know what? You know what's crazy about that? Because one thing, we'll get into this in a second, but screens, pornography can make the real thing actually start to seem lamer and more boring, because this is intense. This is exactly the way you want it. This is 4K. It's color corrected. You even think about scrolling on Instagram and you look at travel pictures of Fiji or Tahiti or Hawaii, and the mountains are greener. The water is clearer. The sky is bluer.
Yeah.
Because everything is filtered. It's prettier on that picture than it actually is in reality. And that's not to minimize reality. Reality is much more beautiful. Yeah. It's just not as like sharp and bright as your phone makes it look. And so reality starts to become boring. Yeah. And you visit Hawaii and you go, the water's not as clear as I thought it was when I was on that person's Instagram travel blog. And the same thing with kids. And it's weird because we love Pixar. Yeah. We love Pixar movies. I think they're brilliant. But also, you watch a Pixar movie, like we just watched the new movie Elemental, which is amazing.
Sure.
But you watch that on a 4K 75-inch TV, and then you go outside an hour after that, and you're like, you almost feel like reality has a hard time competing with what these kids just watched on that TV inside. Because it's so much faster, it's so much brighter, it's so much, all of those things. And so like even in general, reality just starts to become boring, and screens, just to bring that full circle for a second, screens have way more addiction associated with them in every way, shape, or form, whether it's social media or kids on iPads or watching movies or TV shows. And now reality's having a harder time competing with it.
What's interesting is you look at, and I know very little about technology, but you look at what keeps coming out and keeps being invented. Like Apple just did the Vision.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever. It's like they're sitting around going, how can we make this more and more a counterfeit version of the reality that people are looking for?
Okay, so it's great that you bring that up, because to me, this conversation is more critical than ever, because we are on the precipice of the VR world. And when it comes to pornography, that is going to become all the more sinister.
Yeah.
I read when they first had come out with that Apple thing, something like a headline that was like, it is not compatible with pornography, VR, whatever, yet.
Oh.
So if you think of the progression of media way back to probably like magazines, to VHS, to DVD, to the internet, to smartphones.
Correct.
And I think each generation would look back and go, oh, when I was younger, that was way less accessible.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a generation that looks back and goes, man, before VR, I wish I had understood this.
Yes,
because
I agree.
it's going to be that on steroids more and more, because people are going to lose sense of what really is even real around.
Wow. Yes.
And that day will come.
Okay.
Because of the money behind this.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to quote, and I'm going to quote him a few times. Andrew Huberman, neuroscientist from Stanford, has an amazing podcast, talks about dopamine a lot. And so you'll also, by the way, on the Fight for Freedom page, find an episode he did about dopamine, and then he has more stuff on it. He says a quote, and I'm going to now take the liberty of adding to it. He said, a picture...
Hope we don't get sued for this.
I know. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A video is worth 1,000,000 pictures.
Whoa.
Wow.
VR is worth 1 billion videos.
Right.
And so that's what so look at that graph of this step from, VHS to DVD was like this compared to the step from, even your 4K screen on your laptop to VR.
Yeah.
We're talking like
that's where we're headed.
Yeah, that's where we're heading, man.
Which means all the more reason we have to get out in front of this now. Yes. We have to learn how to, let's just call it what it is. It's addictive.
Yeah.
It's a drug. And so let's just name it and acknowledge the fact that, like, if you're watching this, maybe it's become an addictive drug in your life, but there are ways to heal from it. And we have to do that now more than ever, with more urgency than ever.
Absolutely. And I think the heartbreaking thing is most stories that you hear is someone who was a kid, 10, 12 years old, exposed to something that their brain was certainly not ready for.
Yeah.
And then it started to just become a habit in their life. And so for anybody listening to this conversation, there's zero shame, zero judgment.
Yeah.
This in so many ways, of course, the responsibility ends up on your shoulders or how you're going to approach and deal with this. But the entry point for most people was a place of innocence, of being young and naive, and all of a sudden something that's going to take over your brain in a way that you aren't ready for and can't even see the addictive nature of it yet, makes its way into your life. And then you're sitting in a pastor's office years later, like, I didn't want this, but this is where I find myself now. And I think that's where so many people are at right now, of like, I am seeing the sinister nature of this.
Yeah.
This has gone from something I thought was just a normal part of life to an evil in my life that I want freedom from.
Right.
And so let's talk about, how do we fight for freedom? What's the journey, with the hope and prayer that so many people will be able to look back and go, that was the time in my life when I said, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not going to have control over me. And I walked out of addiction.
Yeah. Oh, man. Because I won't speak for you, but I remember being, I don't know how old I was, maybe like 10 or 11, and seeing a movie scene for the very first time. And then seeing something at school. And then it's just like, man, before you even knew what it was, now it has you. And even having an older generation, that the world has changed so quickly that we weren't even prepared to prepare our kids.
Right.
Yeah. We're probably facing and feeling that right now with what's coming. That's even more. I'm not prepared to prepare my son Will.
Right.
Right. I'm going to do the best I absolutely can do to do that. But, it's tough because it starts in innocence, or it starts with trauma, or an incident that was not your fault, that you did not ask for, but that hurt you and marked you in a deeper way. That comes back to when people say sex is just physical. It's like, man, you can disagree on whether it was God's design or not, but don't tell me it's just physical. Like, you're not thinking.
Right.
On any level, if you say it's just physical.
Yeah.
Because if it's just physical, then why are, like, women who get physically assaulted are 10 times more likely to report it than women who get sexually assaulted?
Yeah. Wow. And why are those two different categories in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or that thing happened to you when you were a kid, that sexual thing. Yeah. And you grow up and still believing like it's your fault. Yeah. Still believing, still haven't told anybody or shared it because it runs deeper. Yes. It's not just physical. It is deeply and profoundly spiritual, which, by the way, not that we have to get into all of this, God designed it to be spiritual. God designed it to be powerful. Yeah. And that's why he gives us parameters, not because he's trying to ruin your fun or be the party pooper in the sky and shut your party down early, but because he's actually trying to maximize the gift and minimize the shrapnel. Yes. It's called being a good dad, because he understands more than we do how powerful this thing is. Yeah. It's like when Home Depot sells you a chainsaw, they give you a manual that explains how to do this safely. It's not because Home Depot is trying to rob your fun. Right. It's because they want you to keep all your limbs. Yeah. And they know how powerful this machine they just gave you is. So good. So they're trying to help you. It's the same thing. God, if it's just physical, God wouldn't have done that. Yeah. But it's not. It's spiritual, and it's very, very powerful. Yeah. you know?
And it's supposed to be an incredible gift.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I think there's so much want in us to redeem that for people and help them get to the gift and intention that God had for sex, because the sinister nature of it is the enemy hijacking a gift that God gave, and something that's ingrained in us as sexual beings.
Right.
But hijacking it in all these ways, especially when you're in formative years where you're hitting puberty and you're starting to grow into an adult and you feel desires and all these things. And that gets paired with this counterfeit and sinister thing that has been created. But on the other side of this, there is victory for people, there's freedom for people, and there's the gift of sex being redeemed in our lives. And that's what we want for people. So tell us about the journey.
The same way that your mind, the same way that it can mess up your mind can also be renewed. It can be transformed. God created it that way.
Yeah.
And so like, just know as you're listening to this, that freedom isn't just possible, it's a promise, and that you can reverse all of this and that we can get to work. So
let's talk tangible.
With that tangible.
Yes.
The starting point I have found is to learn to ask the question, what am I medicating right now?
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to try to get down to some of these deeper wounds, soul level wounds. And what you have to start this journey by realizing that you are at some level trying to numb some pain, trying to overcompensate for some pain, trying to push down some things. And when you start to feel like that coming up, what you have just learned to do, and I'm speaking from experience because this is what I have learned to do historically in my own journey, is to push that down and medicate it with pornography. It's a drug of choice that allows you to disassociate with your body and to disappear and numb for a period of time. And it tells you that it's going to fix everything when actually it just makes it worse, right?
Yeah.
And so if you find yourself in this cycle where you're like, man, like 4 days I can stand strong, but then I just find myself right back into it and I don't know what to do, you have to start by realizing there is pain beneath the surface that you are trying to numb. And so what that means very, very practically is the first thing you learn how to do is in the moments where you want to go medicate with porn. This is not easy to do, but if you can get into the habit of just taking 5 really deep breaths, and as you take those breaths, ask yourself the question, what am I trying to medicate right now?
Yeah.
What's going on beneath the surface? For me, it's usually has to deal with insecurities, feeling like I'm not enough, feeling like I'm unworthy. Sometimes it's loneliness. Like there's all sorts of different things going on down there. The first thing you have to do is learn how to name that thing.
That's really
But in
good.
order to name it, you have to allow yourself to feel it. And in that moment, you're going to be so up here. And so what we're trying to help you do with 5 really deep breaths is to sink back down into your body and figure out like what's going on.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You sink down into your body, and because dissociation is a real thing, where sometimes you'll look back and be like, who was that guy who just did that?
Yeah.
That's not me. That's not who I want to be. It's like you truly kind of dissociated from yourself.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's the spirit and the flesh, and all of a sudden the flesh just kind of takes over, and before you even know it, and it
We do that with eating.
Yeah.
We do that with all sorts of
Yeah.
vices.
And I love that you just made this conversation way bigger than pornography for anybody watching this, because we all have our drugs of choice.
Right.
And a good question is, what is your drug of choice? Is it shopping? Is it food? Is it pornography?
Yeah.
Is it social media? I think we all know the answers to that question.
Yeah.
I think a better question is, what is your drug of choice hiding from you?
That's so good.
What is the thing that your drug of choice is keeping you from seeing, that you're afraid to look at? Yeah. And breathing changes your brain's chemistry to kind of stop the dissociation from, like, in its tracks, so that you can, your spirit, I guess, if you will, hops back into the driver's seat and then says, rather than numbing, let's process and let's actually look.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Let me add to that, especially to the people listening to this who are wired like I am, which God has just, my mind is an incredible gift. It's always active. It's always thinking. It makes me really good at doing certain things.
Yeah.
it makes feeling my emotions a challenge for me. And so if you are wired the way that I am, this is especially true for you, that like we have to learn how to name our emotions again. We can actually work on our EQ alongside our IQ and learn how to get emotionally healthy and learn how to not push that down and just stay up here, but sink into our hearts. Like that journey is possible. And so shout out to everyone who is wired the way that I am, man. Let's just, no shame attached to it. Let's just be honest about it. Let's realize that this is a gift, but that also this is a gift. And let's get to work learning how to name and actually feel our emotions.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I would say this. I think, first of all, if we, talking more science for a second, objects in motion stay in motion until an outside force acts upon them. And so you're going to continue to do what you're doing until you make like a drastic change or have like a drastic wake up.
Good.
I remember listening recently to an interview with John Christ, by the way, a guy I would love to have on this podcast.
Let's get him on.
He's hilarious, but I enjoy listening to a lot of the things he has to say because over the past few years, he's gone through being canceled and kind of being a Christian comedian who's in that scene, but then it comes out he's struggling with alcohol and hookup culture and ends up in rehab. And it's really cool to see where he's at now. But one thing he said recently is he was talking to like a counselor and said, man, and this was in his low a couple years ago. He said, man, I'm in rock bottom and it took me getting to rock bottom. And she looked at him and kind of laughed and said, you think you're in rock bottom? You are not at rock bottom. You have family. You have a house. You have hope. You have, you just simply decided this is as low as you want to go. But make no mistake about it, it gets a lot lower.
Wow.
So for whoever, this will be sobering. But I think, like we said, grace and truth sobers you up, but without a hangover.
Right.
Okay? And sometimes this is exactly what your spirit like desperately wants to hear, even though it might be, okay, however long you've been struggling with this and wherever you are today, it feels low. I am telling you, it gets a lot lower. If you continue on this path without making changes. And my hope for you right now, maybe with the supernatural help of the Holy Spirit, is to decide for yourself, this will be, subjectively speaking, my rock bottom. It is not objectively the rock bottom. But for me right now, this is my rock bottom. I don't want to go lower than this. And I need to make a drastic change now. And that really is the only way people ever really see the true lasting change. Otherwise, this is just, I know I should do this and I'll give it a little effort for a few days. That's not going to get you out of this.
I just talked to a guy who was like, I think I want to like kind of fight back and I think I can just like, willpower it. And I was like, bro, I love your heart. You cannot. You're going to have to use the word unreasonable like we've talked about a lot. Only the unreasonable find freedom. You're going to have to get unreasonable about this because willpower is not going to be enough because it's how much more powerful than heroin in your brain? Pornography has some crazy...
Oh, yeah. That was like
100 times more powerful or something?
Yes. Yeah.
So your brain is now...
injected straight into your brain through your eyes.
And in the same way, I think of this conversation, the grace and truth part, it's kind of like having an intervention with someone. Where the people who love you, we're them, we love you. We're coming around a table to come to you and say, hey, this is a problem. And it will get worse.
It will.
And we love you enough to say it's time to fight back and get unreasonable about this and do whatever it takes. And that's going to come with some sharp truth, but spoken out of love because of the freedom that's possible for you and the path that's possible if you just try to half do it, kind of willpower your way through something that you wouldn't say that to somebody who has a heroin addiction.
No.
You could just, will your way out of this. Let's do everything possible to get you free from this.
Let's make a drastic change because it will get worse. It'll get worse in your brain and in your soul. Like you think it'll get more depressing. That depression will get lower. That anxiety will get higher. Life used to be in color and it's kind of dim. It will go all the way to black and white for you until reality is boring Nothing gets you out of bed in the morning. And that's just in your brain.
Yeah.
It will also wreak havoc on everybody around you.
Yes.
A marriage, a future marriage,
Yeah.
your relationship with your kids.
Yeah.
It gets lower.
Yeah.
And it will continue to get worse.
Yeah.
You give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk until it goes. The devil will take you all the way until, I mean, that verse in John 10:10, he literally steals and kills and destroys everything. He wants everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Objectively speaking, that is the rock bottom.
Yeah.
Decide today, this is my
so good,
bottom.
bro.
Yeah.
And now it goes up from here. But that takes wanting it. Otherwise, it's just willpower. And then you start just counting days. Man, it's been 1 day, it's been 2 days, it's been 3 days. Why are you counting? You're just counting the amount of days until you go back.
Yeah.
That's all. Unless you change your identity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just change your behavior. Otherwise, it's just, I'm a guy who's addicted to porn who's really trying not to be addicted. That's why you're counting. Because that's still your identity. This begins with changing the core and the substance of who you are.
Correct.
I am no longer that person who does that.
Yeah.
Therefore, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
And so that work, that deep healing goes into changing who you know you are deep down. Because when you know who you are, you'll know what to go and do.
Yeah.
And as long as it's the same thing like we've talked about, like the cigarette smoker. Like you're trying to quit and you're 5 days in and somebody offers you a cigarette and you answer, no thanks, I'm trying to quit.
Yeah.
Versus, oh, no thanks, I'm not a smoker.
Not a smoker. Yeah.
That's it.
Person A, give them another week.
Yeah.
Because willpower can only get you about that far.
Yeah.
But person B, their identity is different. Therefore, they don't do this anymore.
Yes. Yet there's something in every human that thinks, but I am the person who can willpower. I'm a little different.
You're not. You're not. There's a practical Bible verse to supplement what you just said, or what you just said supplements this Bible verse. First John 4:7. That's off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Okay, so John is known as the apostle of love, and watching his story unfold throughout the Gospels is so much fun. But by the end of his life, he's writing as an old man. And he's known as the apostle of love because if you read John's gospel, but especially 1 John, it's just love each other, love each other, love each other. 1 John 4:7, I think.
Let's hear what you say.
Start with
if it matches.
Does it start with beloved?
It sure does.
Got
Come
it.
on.
Okay, beloved, let us love one another. And so notice what John does here. We all know we're supposed to love our neighbor. We're supposed to love each other. But he starts from a place of identity where he's writing and he goes, beloved, you are the beloved. God loves you. You are God's son. You are God's daughter, adopted into the family of God. You are beloved. That's that deep identity shift that Doug was just talking about. You have to understand at a soul level that you are loved. And then from that place, let's go love each other, right? Let's go not continue to vote for and create demand for more pornography to be made. Instead, let's pray for the people who are caught in it. Let's pray for the people who are making it, who are money hungry and who are making it go. But let's do all of that from a place of identity, from a place of I'm already loved. And here's the big one. You don't have to go like 21 days free from porn for that to be true about you. That's true about you already. You are the beloved. Now, from that place, let's start to move forward and love each other.
Yeah.
good.
I mean, that really is, it's the difference between a Band-Aid and surgery. And I think that, there are the things that we can do and we should do. And it's called being unreasonable. And what I mean by that is only unreasonable men and women who are willing to kind of do things that seem crazy in the world's eyes will find freedom when it comes to this. Like Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6, flee from sexual immorality, which is the Greek word porneia, which is literally where we get pornography. And so he's not saying flirt with it or even fight it. He's saying flee from it, which kind of sounds dramatic.
Yeah.
Or unreasonable.
Unreasonable.
But only those who are willing to be unreasonable will find freedom from this.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that in a second. So you do the things you can do, but what has to happen is God has to give you a new identity. And then you have to believe it. He has to give you a new identity, and you have to believe it. The only real solution for a fractured and fallen world is for the gospel to pierce every broken human heart with the unconditional love of God.
Yeah.
The perfect metaphor, but also not metaphor I can think of for this is our time in India. 10 years ago, we spent a month in India with Pastor Timothy, a local pastor who every single day goes into the red light districts and tries to change the system from the inside out, not with Band-Aids. And of course, he does the logical things, like he has opened some homes for kids whose parents are in sex trafficking, trying to, okay, let's rescue this kid and let's do all the things that are good to do. But what Timothy does with most of his time is he goes around praying not just for prostitutes, but for pimps.
Good.
And so when we, as three young guys, are showing up to India, we're thinking, I can't wait to bust into these red light districts with motorcycles and
Fight the pimp.
I'll fight a pimp, and I will grab these kids, put them on the back of the motorcycle, and let's get the heck out of there. Yeah. And the heart behind that is, okay, absolutely. And there's a time and place for that for sure.
Right.
Justice is helpful, all right? But that's a Band-Aid.
Right.
Because that kid that you just pulled out of there is going to be replaced by 3 more by tomorrow.
Right.
And so do that. But if you don't change this from the inside out, and I think that's what I love about watching Timothy is he wanted to see change. Yeah. And that's the difference. Like when you think about even, and I completely get it, but you talk about like the sex trafficking industry and the porn industry. And by the way, they have a symbiotic relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And when you vote with every click for the porn industry to be stronger, you also indirectly vote for sex trafficking industry to also be stronger. And we have to acknowledge that. And we are advocates. We're called to be advocates of the Imago Dei. And so there is a time and place to bust in and fight a pimp and grab that kid and get out of there. But at the end of the day, the only thing that's truly going to change, because there's a difference between I want to get even and I want things to be different. And I think on the surface, for a lot of especially like young, passionate Christians who we kind of put compassionate like the highest, and in the name of being compassionate, we'll do and say things and promote things and post things. And on surface level, the heart is good, but at the end of the day, I think the real motive is I want to get even and I want to see justice more than you actually want to see things change. And Timothy wanted to see things change.
Yeah.
And Jesus wanted to see things change. Yeah. And the only way that things truly change is for God to change the identity of every person, every prostitute and every pimp, all the abused and the abuser, the victim and the violator, the porn star and the executive team at Pornhub.com. That Jesus hung on a cross to die for. All of them need the gospel. Yeah. And that's the only true solution.
Yes. Because at the depths of this is the broken human condition.
Correct. And we still,
whichever side you walk up to that table on.
We still fight for justice and all those things also. Yes. And the same thing when we bring this back to an individual level, we talk about you with a pornography addiction. We still do all the smart things. We still put the right new browsers on all your devices that replace Safari and Chrome that protect you, and we get accountability, and we join a group, and we educate ourselves, surround ourselves, equip ourselves, all of that stuff. But it's a Band-Aid.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless God supernaturally reminds you of who you really are, and you start to believe that and then live from that instead.
Yeah, it helps you sober up to the point where you can have a healthier perspective and view of what's really going on. It's so hard to do that inner work when you're right in the middle of it. Right. And so those tools are super helpful. Just like if somebody went to rehab, their first step is like, well, let's get you sober first, and then we'll start sitting down with the counselor and having these meetings and having these conversations. And so, that's really what this resource that we created is for. It's like first line of defense. Let's help you get out of this, get a little perspective, sober up, so to speak. And by the way, and then you realize you never graduate from it. You always have to be careful and all of that. But from that place of perspective, you can start to actually do some of the work. You said something really interesting before we recorded this. You said it's kind of like becoming the only sober person at the party. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think when you look at our society, porn is so normalized and the sexualization of everything is so normalized that to be having a conversation stepping outside of that to go, hey, everybody, look, this is not good.
Yeah.
You feel like the sober person at a party of drunk people. And all the drunk people are looking at you like, dude, why are, like, I was the drunk person at a lot of parties back in the day, like, and being like, who's this guy? Why wouldn't you be taking part in this? This is what everybody does. Yeah. And there's a part of you as the person in the party that's looking at them like, how are you stable enough to not be doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Right. What do you know that I don't know, but all I know to do is make fun of you? I think it feels that way for a person to step out of looking at the science, the spiritual side, like all this with pornography, and look at a culture and go, guys, this is really bad.
Oh yeah.
We really, really need to pay attention to this, but it can sometimes maybe feel a little hopeless because it feels like everybody's just in that party like, no, this is normal, like more.
Right.
But we're trying to be a voice for being the sober guy at that party to help other people because we've also been in that party.
Yeah.
It's not the place you want to be.
Yeah, but at that party, it's almost like you don't want sober people. So if you're going to be sober, you kind of reveal something in me that I don't like.
Right.
Because you represent what I'm currently not.
Yes.
I remember telling a story about like watching like a violent movie at night after the kids were in bed, and then Will, when he was 3, walked into the living room during like a bunch of F-bombs, and then we paused it, and it was like, we were just okay with this until Innocence walked into the room.
Totally.
And then it revealed something to us.
There's nothing more unnerving when you are stuck in sin than someone else's integrity or someone else's willingness to not do what everyone else is doing. It's kind of rattles you. But I think of this conversation and our heart for this as being the sober person at the party that's like, dude, I will drive you home and I have no judgment for you. I just want you to be safe.
Yes, right.
But tomorrow I do want to sit down and talk because I'm like, this isn't fun anymore.
Correct.
And there's some things that as your friend who's outside of this is looking in and going, bro, how can I help you? And so let's talk real quick about some of those. I think it is, like you said, it's a pairing of, it starts with identity.
Yeah.
It has to be a God-given identity that you realize that you are a son or a daughter of the King. And you are his beloved, and that's how he sees you. And that means that he has gifts and a life for you that's different than what the world is going to feed you. So you got to start there, but then there are practical things to do, and each one of those is a vote for that identity to keep reminding you of, no, this is who I am, and I can live like this too. It's not just theory that I'm called this, but I can walk that out and live this way. And more important research like Atomic Habits and stuff talks, more important than 10,000 hours is 10,000 repetitions. Is not counting the days, but the amount, like each time I say no to this is another vote to say, no, this, I'm not a person stuck in pornography. It's not who I am. So what are the practical things that you guys would say are the most important to help somebody on that journey?
There's a bunch. Community is the first thing, is not fighting this fight alone. You two have both been such a massive gift to me over the years. Having a safe space to talk about things, but also not letting me settle. You have been that picture of both grace and truth for me. And so the first thing I would say is isolation. The enemy is always going to try to move this conversation to isolation. That's why there's so much shame involved with it. And so bringing it into the light, confessing it, like James says, is when we confess to each other that we're healed. But then almost as important, having people on speed dial ready to pray with you, ready to talk when you just need somebody to talk to or somebody to pray with. And so the first thing I would say is like, you would never see a UFC fighter going out without cornermen and do like a massive fight.
Correct.
Right. Like you're going to walk into that arena and you're going to have your people with you to fight with you.
100%.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I would also say education on what you're going through. And, there's a reason if you're in rehab for narcotics, for instance, you're going to learn something new every day about how your brain works and what these drugs do to you and the journey that is in front of you. Because when you understand it, then it's way easier to go through it. I mean, it's not easy, but it's okay. I'm not shocked. It's very helpful. It's a tool. And so educating yourself on, like, for instance, they say traditionally it's about a 90-day journey. So if you've been in this addiction and then let's say you stop, and by the way, if you tell yourself one more time and then I'll stop, you're lying to yourself every time. And the reason is because whatever you feed, you get, like, that thing gets stronger. That will not be one more time. What can be true is yesterday was the last time. That can be true. And once you decide that, Now you've got probably a journey of about 90 days where the first 2 weeks are by far going to be the worst because your brain is going through withdrawals.
Yeah.
Dopamine withdrawals, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Dopamine withdrawals. There's a few things happening where, and dopamine being the big one. The others, really quick, is, serotonin and oxytocin that cause you, for instance, that oxytocin, when you are watching pornography, and then that leads to masturbation and an orgasm, that oxytocin, along with the dopamine, gets dumped into your brain like crazy. But what oxytocin is,
Bond.
it causes you to bond with whatever it is that's around you. And so sometimes that's a computer screen. Like sometimes it's the woman or those two people or that man, whatever it is, in the computer screen. Sometimes though, it's the physical laptop.
Jeez.
It's the anticipation
Yeah.
of the reward. So to
Yeah, and
The process of driving home from a stressful day of work and like going through it and
and then
all of that, the routine of it.
Yep. And people know, like, all of a sudden, like, let's say it's it's after work, I drive, and I'm just making up a hypothetical situation because I know other stories that are true, but I'll just make up one. Like you get in that car and you drive to that place, and then that's your, like, at the end of the day, that's your like reward, so to speak.
Yeah.
That car can start to become the thing that you are bonded to. And then before you know it, a few years goes by and you get married, but you can't actually have sex with a woman on your honeymoon because your car's back home.
Wow.
I know, that's how powerful oxytocin is.
Wow.
It causes you to bond with whatever it is that's in
Interesting.
front of you.
Okay, so the first 2 weeks, you're going to be going through major withdrawals from that
Major withdrawals,
oxytocin, right?
yeah, from that, but then also it's like the dopamine.
Okay.
Because dopamine in your brain is more designed for the pursuit than it is for the reward. It has its place with the reward because, let's say you win the Super Bowl, that's going to dump crazy amounts of dopamine that night. But that's why, like, Tom Brady will wake up the next morning and feel low after the highest night of his life, but also why he's very successful. The most successful people in whatever industry are the ones who fall in love with the day-to-day pursuit of the reward. When you work out, not to have the cheeseburger at the end, but work out and you just tell yourself, this set that most normal people would complain about, I freaking love this. Your brain is very sort of dumb and will start to follow whatever it is that you start telling it and will start to be trained that, no, we love this. And it drips dopamine in healthy ways. Dopamine's designed to get you out the front door, off the couch, to go pursue the things that are good for you. And so it rewards you a little bit at the end, but it's the motivator that gets you going. And so it's more designed to drip. But when you have the reward without the pursuit, which is, we mentioned heroin, a synthetic drug, is all reward. You had to do nothing to get that.
Right.
You didn't have to work all year on an NFL team and train and go to every practice and win every game. And then, like, that's different than all of a sudden you pop 2 Percocet and you feel the amazing reward and you had to do nothing to get it. And porn's the same thing. There's no pursuit of, like, let's just say, this is men and women. 1 in 3 pornography users are women, so this isn't a guy thing. This is an us thing. This is everybody. But let's just say, hypothetically, it's a guy. His dopamine system was given to him by God, designed to help him to pursue. Motivates him to notice a woman, ask her out, plan a date, plan another date, buy the flowers, work on communication, work on intimacy problems, buy the ring, spend the money on it, commit to her, sacrifice for her. And then as he does that, it drips a healthy amount of dopamine to give him satisfaction, enjoyment, meaning, and purpose in the process and on the journey, day by day. And then, in its proper context, it also dumps some dopamine for the reward of sex to make that moment amazing in its right place. But when all he has to do is have an iPhone, and you can get all the reward. When all you have to do nowadays, like even hookup culture, is DM somebody, or you get on an app where these, like, you just know, like, this person will have sex with me tonight, no strings attached, and there's no pursuit. Once again, I will quote Andrew Huberman. getting that sort of love drug dopamine reward without any pursuit is one of the most terrible things imaginable for the human brain. It is not designed for that. Wow. And so when you no longer have just this source that gives you dumps of dopamine and in such high potent quantities in your brain, you're going to feel low. And it's dumping so much that it depletes it. And so let's say your baseline was here, and then you went on a binger, and you had dopamine released into your brain, but it's depleted, and now you're actually below baseline, which, by the way, is how God designed the dopamine system in your brain to work.
Right.
And so let's just say it's a good thing. Like, let's say when we went bungee jumping all those years ago, that dumps crazy amounts of dopamine. Yeah. And then you actually, later that day or the next day, you feel sad. You feel low. And that's actually fine. That it's just resetting. It's refilling. The danger is, the temptation is you want to do anything you can to not feel low.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of guys like porn binge the night before. You wake up the next morning, and it's not just shame and guilt. It's also, chemically speaking, a depletion of dopamine. Get back up to base. And then you'll go to 7-Eleven and buy 2 energy drinks. Because you're like, I want to
get back.
Yeah, I got to get back. But if you just wait and not try to help it, and then people will help it with more of the same drug.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you just wait, it will do what it's designed to do, which is it's neuroplastic in bad ways, but it's neuroplastic also in good ways, and it'll reset. But, you know, if it's been a while for you, you've got 2 weeks where it's going to be a slow back to baseline for you, and you're going to feel low. But don't panic. This is why education is helpful. So you don't panic.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what we're talking about, you're going to think this is the rest of my life in black and white.
Right.
It's not.
It's just not.
It's just a couple of weeks, and then it gets better. But you're not out of it. You'll have good weeks. You'll have bad weeks. You'll have good days. You'll have bad days. And the more that you know about this journey, when you, let's just say, if you get a month in or 2 months in, and then you have one slip up, don't binge.
Yeah.
Don't say, well, it's all over, so I might as well. No. You're doing really well. Just immediately bounce back.
Yeah.
Call somebody, community.
Good.
Text somebody.
Yeah.
Don't binge. Don't panic. Don't binge.
Right.
Keep going. You didn't lose it all. You didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why education, I think, is helpful for this stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then there's apps like Covenant Eyes that you can literally utilize that as your web browser that will not let you get to those sites.
Correct.
There are our favorite story ever to tell is our friend who was utilizing, was it XXX Church?
Yeah.
One of those things where you put an email,
Eyes,
you put an email address in of someone, and it sends a weekly report or however often, and it flags, hey, these are the things for accountability. And he put his mom's email address because that's how much he wanted to be free, and he is free.
Yeah,
and that's what I tell a lot of guys. I'm like, hey, dude, if you really want to be free, this is going to sound crazy to you. My buddy doesn't have a porn addiction now.
Right.
So might sound nuts, but this is what's going to work is if you take some extreme measures here, because otherwise it is literally like living with your drug dealer. Because you have a laptop, you have an iPad, and you have a phone. They are with you all the time.
That's really well said.
And so there's no way to avoid that if you're in the same house all the time. It's going to be impossible. So you have to take those measures. I think that some of my proudest moments as a group of friends have been getting emails of reports for each other and being like, all right, man, this week we're going to have a real conversation because there's clearly some struggle. And then weeks of like, dude, you're healing. You're growing like there wasn't anything, and no judgment or shame either way on either side. But I think that's an important thing to note as the accountability partner in the situation or finding one. Because I've heard some people like, well, those apps are just for shaming people. Like, well, yeah, if their person in their life wants to shame them, if that's the
then
person
you need
they
a new
picked,
accountability partner,
and then you need better friends.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is somebody that's going to walk alongside you.
And we have a whole other episode on confession where we talk about that, by the way. So
absolutely.
Sorry, keep going.
But it needs to be someone who loves you enough to speak truth to you, and who also is not going to make you feel worse for something you already feel bad about.
Yeah.
But they will say something, and choosing that person, I think, can be tough for people.
Yeah.
I remember in college, I've always laughed about one of our buddies in our Bible study had his girlfriend coming to visit long distance. And at the time he called me being like, hey dude, like how far is too far? And even then as like a 19-year-old who was a party kid, I was like, I know why you're calling me because I'm going to license you to do more than some of these other guys will. So it needs to be somebody who's going to love you, but also not somebody who's going to just be like, dude, you know, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But those tangible tools are the pairing with the identity that are going to keep voting.
Yeah.
I'm not a person who's addicted to pornography. I'm not a porn addict.
Yeah,
And I have all these things helping me.
Right.
I'm not living with my drug dealer anymore.
Yeah.
I've kicked him out of the house.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
good, man.
Yep. And maybe you need like a full-on dopamine detox.
Sure.
Because if you get rid of porn, you're probably going to just step up with video games and social media.
Yeah.
And so, and then it's just like the same, and then you're actually stalling your brain getting back to like a healthy baseline. So you might just need to like
Read a book, man.
Yeah.
Just read. Drink some tea and read a book.
Yep, absolutely. I remember last year I went to like that 5-day one-on-one intensive counseling thing, no screens. And so it'd be a full day of counseling. I'd get back to my room by like 9 p.m., 8:30 p.m. And the biggest dopamine hit available to me is the Bible. Wow. This is the only book I had, and I had no screen and no music. And so it's like that was a little scary.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, but this actually wants to be everything that you're looking for everywhere else. And it was wild after 5 days even, where it was hard. I remember flying home from that feeling, like thinking, I haven't felt this good in a decade. Yeah. And not just because of the counseling, also because of like a dopamine detox. Yeah. And if you know, like you want, like our friend who put his mom's email address in there.
Yeah.
He lives an uncommon life.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you want an uncommon life and an uncommon marriage, it's going to, you can't get that with common measures.
Right.
And the world is common. And if you want something more, you have to do things different.
Yeah.
And you have to live in a way that demands an explanation from the world, where they look at you and the measures you're taking and go, that's dramatic.
Yeah.
That's unreasonable.
Yeah.
But it's only the unreasonable who will find freedom from this.
So we broke it down to educate yourself,
Yeah.
protect yourself, surround yourself.
Correct.
And we have a bunch of resources available for that, and we'll link that.
Can I add one more bonus in there? Galatians 6:2 says, bear each other's burdens, carry each other's burdens. One of the ways I think about it is the best defense is oftentimes good offense.
Yep.
And so it's so important to protect yourself and have all the defense. Another great way is to turn the fight against the enemy. And to, when you feel tempted to go back to this drug, to actually go, no. And not only is it a no for me, I'm also going to spend the next 15 minutes interceding and praying for anybody in the world who is struggling with it, or anybody who is caught up in it in any way.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to donate to or I'm going to call a friend, or I'm going to text somebody.
Yeah.
And when you start playing offense that way,
That's good, dude.
all of a sudden the fight gets really fun, because you're going, I'm not just like holding on for dear life to not do it.
Yeah.
I'm actually flipping it and moving the ball forward.
And in that accountability friendship, not just having somebody who's holding you accountable, but when you're holding someone else accountable, it pushes you, because you're spurring each other on at the same time, and you start to see wins in their life, and that encourages you. The same way when you're doing a Bible reading plan, it'd be way more effective if I'm like, let's all read this every day and check in with each other, versus, hey, you guys read this and tell me about it. Right? Like you got to push each other and walk together on that journey. What are some of the victories that you've seen to give people some hope, and people we've counseled, stories?
I can just share a personal experience
Please.
for me. I remember the summer that all of this clicked for me, and the fight for purity became real, and I started to actually figure out what I was medicating. The way I explained it to you guys is I felt like I was watching a black and white TV.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the summer, I felt like all the color was back. Like I was actually hearing birds chirping, and I was actually seeing vivid colors, and I was actually like enjoying waking up in the morning. And so what I want to say is, like, not that my journey has it's been a long journey, and there's lots of stories to tell within there along the way, but freedom is actually possible. I've experienced it in my life, and I can just tell you from the other side, it is better.
It's better. Yeah. But I will say this, I think it's an acquired taste. I recently read Matthew Perry's book about addiction, and he described reality as an acquired taste.
Good.
So in other words, you love coffee.
I do.
But the first time you tried coffee when you were 13, it didn't taste like soda. It tasted like dirt.
Right.
You're like, this. Nobody tasted coffee for the first time and thought, I love this, tastes so good. But you learn, you acquire that taste. and now you look forward to it, and now it's life-giving.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing's true about reality with no drugs in your system.
Yeah.
And that includes even screens in general. You know, that includes, to bring this full circle back to that picture of Hawaii that you're looking on Instagram. And then you look at the real thing and you're like, I'm telling you, this is more beautiful. This is better. Yeah. It's an acquired taste. Yeah. So if you look at reality and you look at freedom and you're 3 days in and you think, why am I working so hard for this? This is not better. It is better. Yeah. You just have to relearn that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you will acquire it.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And then also shame. You asked me about like my personal story and what one of our counselors, Gary Brugman, has done for us. I've now gotten to do for other guys I talk to.
That's right.
Because so much confession. I even remember talking to him like 8 years ago about stuff from 10 years before that.
Sure.
And just saying it and saying it and saying it. And what I got met with was, I remember there was a few times he just started laughing. Like after I just divulged 45 minutes of everything I've ever been afraid of anybody knowing. And what he does is starts laughing, not in a way of like,
He's not laughing at you.
No, not laughing at me, and also not minimizing it and giving sin the wink and the gun. Like, who cares? That's not it at all. In a way where it's like, that is so powerless next to the grace of Jesus. Good. And now that you brought it from darkness and into light, I have. That's one of those afternoons. I remember we had lunch and I drove away from that feeling lighter than I've ever felt in my life, because I finally had freedom from shame. Yeah. And I think that's your first step in freedom from this particular sin. If somebody has no desire to get out of this and wants to keep it going, then if I told you need no shame, that's just going to license you to keep going. Right. But if you're listening to this and you are because you want this out of your life, then the first thing that needs to happen is freedom from shame, because that shame is part of the wound that you keep running back to pornography to medicate and numb. Good. And that shame is actually, we think I need more shame, because if I can just feel more and more and more and more shame, then I'll stop doing it.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, that shame gets more and more painful.
Yeah.
And then it causes you to go back to your drug. And once you're free from that, all of a sudden you're like, it's like my drug could be right here. Yeah. And it has less power over me. Yeah. Because I'm more healed and I more know my new identity, and I'm living from that.
Yeah, you know you're the beloved.
Yeah.
Beloved.
And
let us love one another.
And who I really am and who God really made me to be actually doesn't need that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, what lies ahead for the identity rebuilding, the practical habits and things that are going to help is the vision of, and this is the journey I'm on. And that's the family that I dream of having. Yeah. That's the marriage that I want to have. Yeah. That's the life I want to live. That's the way I want to see people. That's the redeemed view of sex that I want to have. And with that vision, that pulls you forward to make every little vote against something that's trying to rob that from you.
Yeah. Amen.
So good.
Well, do you guys have any last thoughts, any last things to share when talking about?
I just love what you said about vision.
Yeah.
The better vision that you can get for the best in front of you. Your life is not meaningless. The best is yet to come. It is possible to experience everything that God has for you with a renewed mind and experience that intimacy with a spouse, you know, the way it's designed to be. Yeah. It is also possible, but you need to get a vision of it, because when you know what you want most, it becomes infinitely easier to choose what you want most over what you want now. That's right in front of you. Yeah. You need to have that. That's why the Bible says without vision, people perish. Yeah. You need, and the number one cause they say of pornography addiction right now is meaninglessness, which breaks my heart because it speaks of no vision. Right. Without vision, people perish. I guess the Bible's right. Yeah. So you need to take some time dreaming with God, asking other men, women who are older than you, who you see something in them that you want. Like, I want to be like that. I want, and the more clearly you can paint that in your imagination, the more power that's going to give you today to choose that over what I just happen to want right now because I'm exhausted or I'm angry or I'm tempted or whatever.
Yeah. And so to the person listening to this, may you have the grace and the understanding to know that you are loved right where you're at, May you have the truth to know that there is better for you, that God has more for you. May you have the strength to get back up. May you have the understanding that his mercy is made new for you today, that there is now no condemnation. Romans 8:1 says, for those who are in Christ Jesus, and that today can be a new day, and that there really is a brighter future for you, and you're not alone. We love you. We are surrounding you. We are praying for you, and let's fight back against this thing together.
Well said.
Amen.
Fight for freedom.